Jene, Elzie, it's so great to see you.
It's good to see you.
Yeah, thank you. It's been about a year since our last interview, and I know lots happened since then. Love for you to share what you've been up to, where you are now, and how did you get here?
Sure. So it's really been a year of evolution for me. After 5 years, the big change for me is after 5 years with the NBA, I now have moved on to another job. I am at a company called Athletesfirst PARTNERS, and we are the exclusive sales and marketing agency for the National Basketball Players Association, so the Players Union. So somehow I managed to still stay in basketball, but just in a different angle. And I think for me, a lot of this was why I say it's an evolution. Was a lot of it for me was about understanding when I was ready to take the next step, exactly the steps that I needed to do to lay that plan out. So when the opportunity came, it really just fell into place. I knew that I was looking for something where I could really feel like I could make a difference. I think the first step for me when I knew that I was ready to grow to the next step was really not just to take the first thing that came along, but to really understand what my passion and my purpose was. A lot of this for me was about just taking a risk and taking the leap. Because obviously a lot of people would say, I can't believe you've gone from this, amazing brand. You've gone into this new space where I haven't worked in an agency role before. I haven't worked at a company like this before, and we're really just building this from the ground up and starting with a blank space. So for me, that's what I knew my passions are. I love building. I love strategizing. I love working, obviously in sports. I knew I wanted to do that. And so everything for me just came together. As soon as I put it out into the universe that this is what I wanted for my next step to be, it just kind of flowed from there. So I did a lot of networking in the beginning. I talked to people in all kinds of spaces. I was looking at, venture capital. I was looking at agencies. I was looking at, more traditional brands. And then the right thing came along, and that was Athletesfirst PARTNERS.
So can you talk a little bit more about how that connection was made? How did you meet up with Athletesfirst?
So a lot of it was through my existing network. I found when I first started thinking about what my next move was, the biggest challenge, and I think a lot of people had this challenge, is I would just have a lot of informational interviews and not really be clear on what I wanted, other than I'm looking for this title, or I'm looking for this kind of role, or I'm applying for this job. I actually kind of flipped it and reversed it. And what I did was I sat down and I said, what are the most important things to me? From an environmental standpoint, from a career standpoint. I knew I liked working in smaller groups. I very much have an entrepreneurial spirit, mainly because I come from the Bay Area where that's fostered. I also knew that I wanted to stay in New York, which is very important to me. I knew I wanted to be in a job that I felt like we could really create something, and we're going out and selling an amazing product, and something that really inspired me. And through the work at NBA, I became very inspired by players, and in particular, and the impact that they have with not just brands, but more importantly with people around the world. So the fact that I now get to do that on the other, from a different angle is just, I couldn't ask for more.
That's amazing. So it was really very reflective on your part in terms of truly thinking about what your priorities are, and really kind of articulating what those are. Because a lot of times we have a rough idea, but we don't actually sit down, articulate it, and then document it. And it's not so clear necessarily, but it sounds like you went through a very reflective process.
Yes.
To prioritize.
Yes. It started out with just what my purpose is. And I know that sounds kind of very general and generic, but the reality is I had to spend a lot of time doing the work to know what really drives me. And what drives me is inspiration. I love to be inspired, and that sounds like a very sort of lofty statement, but the reality is, for me, working in whether it's divisions or companies or environments, where it's about discovering new things, discovering new people, discovering new ideas. That's what I love. And I love to help other people also realize their goals. So I'm not necessarily the person that's going to start my own company, because that is really not, I don't have an interest in that. But I love to figure out how you take a new product, for example, or you take a new idea and you really bring it to life. That's what inspires me and that's what drives me. So after that, it became very easy to figure out which opportunities to say no to and which opportunity to say yes to.
As a result of this process, then, do you feel that you came out with a clear personal vision statement?
Yes, absolutely.
How would you describe your vision for yourself?
I would say that for me, it's quite simple. Finding inspiration and energy in what I do, and if I don't find it, then let it go.
That's very powerful. So you're doing a lot of stuff right now. You've got a full-time job. I understand that you're on boards as well, doing advisory work, really doing a lot of meaningful work. How do you do it?
I think the first thing for me is I only do what I enjoy doing. I've been at this career long enough where I feel like I can have some choices. I can choose to spend my time doing the things that I want to do. So whether that's, I was doing some advisory work with some early to mid-stage startup companies before I came over to Athletesfirst PARTNERS. I absolutely love doing that. I was working, on a couple of boards, as you mentioned. I really enjoy doing that. All of the things that I do, you get a lot of opportunities when you've been doing this for this long. And I think it's because I'm so clear on what my personal vision is, it's easy for me to sort of filter through and say, this is what, yes to this one, no to this one, yes to this one.
That's great. Yeah. So really knowing your personal vision helps you to basically clear away the clutter in a sense.
Very quickly. Yes.
Yeah, because if it's not aligned with who you want to be at the end of the day and building up towards that, then it's not worth it. Because you do have very limited time and you want to stay focused. Since the last time we spoke, I've also developed another framework, which I call the present paradigm.
Yes.
Which is really about how can you be more effective and present in many facets of your life as a leader, as an ally, as well as a parent. And so I'd love to hear from you, especially from a leader perspective and also from an ally perspective. Well, what do you think of the paradigm? And so again, just to summarize, the present paradigm is really about when you're especially when you're talking about your team, right, and leading your team. One is being present for your team when they really need you, as opposed to hovering over them, micromanaging them, but really being present when it matters. It's about being present in terms of when you are together, being attentive and really listening to their needs. Yeah. And then present as well in terms of providing 3 important presents or gifts, which are the gifts of opportunity, empowerment, and inspiration. And I'd love to hear from you in terms of what are your thoughts in terms of that present paradigm, and how do you feel you live by it as a leader and also as an ally, a friend, a colleague to others in terms of helping them be successful?
So when I think of the present paradigm, I think I see there's a lot that resonates for me in terms of the kind of leader that I want to be, the kind of ally and friend that I want to be. I love the idea of thinking about opportunity, for example. How can you always be helping whether it's through work or whether it's just in your life in general, helping people discover opportunity? Because I think one thing that can tend to happen a lot is, again, going back to the idea of we're working so hard, we have these blinders on, and I think a lot of people tend to put restrictions on themselves. They tend to put up their own lanes, and just helping people, if it's someone that I'm working with, if it's a young person, or if it's somebody who's been in their career for a long time, it's just a friend, thinking about have you thought about it from this angle? Do you think that there's an opportunity if it's something that you've never done before? Maybe you haven't gone and sold product before, but you know what? You're a really great person. You're a people person. This could actually be a really interesting opportunity for you. I get presented opportunities all the time. And sometimes you find that the most unexpected person might be the best fit for that particular opportunity. So that really resonated with me. And second, from a point of empowerment, I'm a big believer in letting people learn, giving people the appropriate amount of responsibility, and making it okay to fail. I think we talk about, again, maybe this is coming from my background in the Bay Area and Silicon Valley, where failing is actually a good thing, as long as you don't fail too much. But I think we have to not be afraid of it. And I think it is really easy to fear failure for whatever reason. It could be in a job, it can be in a career move. When I was talking about my next move with some of my friends or some of my sort of my peer network, the whole idea was, oh, well, you can't go from this big, secure company to the unknown. What are you going to do? And I just felt like, I'm going to be okay. Whatever happens, you're making a choice. There are no right or wrong choices. So when it comes to empowering people, I think you have to empower them to make a decision. Whether it's good or bad in your eyes doesn't matter. As long as people feel like that they can make decisions and take responsibility and defend those decisions, then I think you've done your job.
That's great. And I know you inspire me every day. Let's talk a little bit about the inspiration. I know inspiration is very important to you. Can you talk a little bit more about your thoughts on that as a leader and as an ally?
For me, what inspiration means is just, even if it's something as simple as having fun, remembering to have fun, finding things that make people smile, that make people laugh. Are we just enjoying this process? Because if we're not, then you're not inspired. And I think when we use the term inspiration, I always think of these big lofty goals and, I have to be inspired. But the reality is you can find inspiration in doing your first deal. You can find inspiration in having a really difficult conversation with someone that went better than you thought it did. You can find inspiration in just helping, doing one volunteer project that makes you smile. So I really think that inspiration for me is just kind of a catchphrase for everything that means fun and enjoyment.
That's great. And it can be found, as you say, in the day-to-day.
Yeah.
And then also in terms of inspiring others, it's about role modeling behavior, which honestly, you're my role model, so you inspire me. So you definitely exhibit inspiration for your allies as well as for your team.
Thank you.
I would love to also, hear more about polling power.
Yes.
And how you actually leverage polling power and the framework, which, as we know, is about how do you propel yourself and others while managing what matters. So really staying focused, right, on what matters at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. And I'd really love to hear from your perspective, how did you leverage polling power in your transition from what you were doing a year ago to what you're doing now?
So I think when I think of polling power, as I was going through sort of the list, everything from priorities to opportunities to networking to leadership, all of those really played a part in where I am now and using those tools to really kind of get clear on what I needed to do next. So when you ask me which of the polling powers sort of did I use, it's really, the answer is everything. Starting with priorities. I think that was the first, because again, going back to having a vision that you're ready for a change in your life or a change in your career can be a bit overwhelming. Yes, and it was certainly overwhelming for me. Indeed. And I think that I had to step back and not say, I got to jump into this head first. And I have to just I have to look at everything that comes my way. Really taking the time and really through the tools in the workshop, understanding what priorities mean. And it's not about just what sounds the coolest or what seems really like a great idea. If it doesn't align with, in my case, it was probably 5 different criteria that I had in terms of what was going to be a good fit for me. If it didn't align with that, then it's not a priority.
So, Jene, really would love to go through with you specifically your polling power matrix and really how you stack up in terms of where you are today with polling power. So, how is your polling power index? So why don't we go ahead and we'll actually lead everyone through this exercise. I think this will be really helpful in helping people to figure out their own polling power.
Great.
So in your particular situation, let's talk about overall, do you feel that you are persevering for your priorities and passions and your vision for your authentic self?
110%.
All right, so go ahead and check off that box. Overall, do you feel that you are meeting your obligations in terms of what you're accountable for and who you're accountable for?
Yes.
Go ahead and check off that box. Great. Overall, do you feel that what you're doing is worthwhile in terms of the impact that you're seeking?
Absolutely.
Go ahead and check off that box. Is what you're doing energizing you to make the juggling act sustainable?
Every day. Yes.
And do you have the resources to do what it is that you're doing?
Yes.
Let's check off that box. Great. So, Jene, in terms of others, can we talk about how you feel that you're helping others? First of all, do you feel that you are helping others?
When I think about where I am in my career, I've been doing this for 20 years. One of the things, again, going back to what inspires me, is working with young people. So I spent a lot of time, even as I was transitioning out of my previous job, I spent a lot of time working with, whether it's somebody just coming out of college or somebody just coming out of grad school. I spent a lot of time mentoring. I also did a lot of work with some universities, guest lecturing. I love to watch people learn because I always put myself back in that position 20 years ago. And I had some really amazing, not just mentors, but advisors, coaches, friends, people that helped me from the very first job that I had in sports, helped me to really be where I am today. So I think about that a lot. I spend a lot of time doing that. That's kind of where I like to put my focus and my priorities.
Great. So it seems that you are helping others, and is this way, your way of helping others, aligned with your priorities then?
Yes.
And if so, feel free to check that box. Are you still able to meet your obligations by helping others in the way that you've been doing?
Yes, that's pretty easy for me since I know that my obligations and one of the things that I'm here to do is really to help others, so it goes hand in hand.
Great, so you were able to check off the box under obligations. So in this way of helping others, do you feel that it's actually worthwhile in terms of the impact?
Yes, it's the thing that probably drives me more than anything, so yes.
Great. So go ahead and check off that box. And it clearly seems as though it energizes you as well.
Yes.
So go ahead and check that off. And do you have the resources to help others in this way?
I wish I had more time in the day, but other than that, yes.
Great. Go ahead and check that off. So, Jene, do you feel that you are just moving on to the next row? Do you feel that you are leading in terms of being proactive and driving change and action?
Yes.
How so? Can you talk about that?
I think when I think about things that work for me and the tools that I've used to kind of get to where I am now, I love to share that with other people because I think a lot of time we spend just focusing on what's the next step without thinking about how to get there. So I've shared my journey with several of my friends, some of my colleagues, and I think that helps just sort of helps people think about it in a different way.
Okay, great. So you are leading, and that's aligned with your priorities, your obligations. Are you still able to meet your obligations?
Yes.
Go ahead and check that off. Is that way of leading actually worthwhile in terms of the impact?
Yes, it is.
Go ahead and check it off. And does it energize you?
Very much.
And do you have the resources to lead this way?
Yes.
Very good. This is amazing. And so, Jene, do you feel that you're also inspiring? And if so, how do you feel you're inspiring?
I would say inspiring and am inspired. So when I think about, again, going back to what really drives me and what energizes me, so if I can work with some of the advisory work that I was doing before this role, I started working with early stage startups. Everyone is really, really excited in those early stages, and there's so much energy, especially a place like New York, where it's just, brimming with that kind of energy. I get really excited about that. And when I was able to sit down with some of these companies and help them refine their thinking, and look at it from a different angle, because when you're in it and when you're building the product, all you can see is the product. Taking a step back and looking at how are you marketing? How are you thinking about the bigger picture? How are you thinking about this from a strategic standpoint? That's what I had been doing with many of the startups. So I just loved that.
So you are very much inspiring. And so let's go back to this matrix. As you're inspiring, is that aligned with your priorities? Yes. Obligations, yes. Are you meeting your obligations?
Yes.
Is it worthwhile in terms of impact?
Yes.
Are you energized by it?
Very much.
And do you have the resources to do it?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That's perfect. Networking. So do you feel that you're networking? And if so, how?
Yes, I have reached out to my entire network, it feels like, in the last 2 years that I've been back here. I think one of the things for me, I was in London for 7 years. So being out of the typical network, not just in the sports industry, but just in every area of my life, I was very conscious that I needed to rebuild my network when I got back here. So I'd say the last 2 years, I've spent really reactivating not just my sports network, but the media network, a lot of my Stanford network. I had people, who were friends or who, now that I'm on the Stanford board, people on the board, I've just been surprised at how open and accommodating people have been. Really helping with anything and any part of what I was looking for. I didn't really even need to articulate my vision that clearly because so many people were helping me do that, that by the time I actually did, it was even easier to reach out to a broader network. So I have tapped every single part of every network that I know. That's
amazing. So you've really been focused on establishing, building, and leveraging your relationships.
Very much.
That's awesome. So how does it align with your power? I think you've got the hang of it. So align with your priorities. How about your obligations?
Yes.
Is it worthwhile?
Very.
Energize you?
Yes.
You have the resources to do it?
Yes.
Excellent. And grow. This is a big one. And so do you feel that you are growing, Jene, in terms of developing personally and other ways?
Yes, I feel like I've grown more in probably the last few years than I have in the early parts of my career. And I think one of the reasons is because I feel like when you're on that just sort of wheel and you're just going and going and going, which happens a lot, and you don't step back and you don't take time to actually look at where you've been and look at where you are now, it's very difficult to think about where you want to go next. So I spend a lot of time now just appreciating the moment and just being in the moment and saying, this is actually where I want to be right now. Where I want to be next, we'll figure that out. But I feel like what has really helped me grow is just appreciating the now and stop thinking about the past and the future.
Wow. And so going back to the pulling power matrix, so is your way of growing aligned with your priorities, your obligations, what's worthwhile, your energy, yes, and your resources?
Yes, 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 and yes.
You're amazing. I'm very, very, very impressed that you were able to check off every single box, which means that your polling power index is 100 because you were able to check off 100% of the boxes. And that means that you feel that you are propelling yourself and others while managing what matters. Do you feel that overall that is a correct statement?
Yes. I love the idea of managing what matters. Get rid of everything else and just focus on what matters.
Fantastic. So I recall from our interview last year that you attribute a lot of your success to your parents.
Yes.
And as mentioned, the present paradigm also applies to parenting, being a present parent. In terms of being there, your parents being there for you when you really needed them, being there in terms of being attentive to you when you were together, and providing you with those three important gifts in life of opportunity, empowerment, and inspiration. And so I would love to take this opportunity for you to actually speak to your parents. They're out there. And it'd be great if you could talk about how they were present parents for you. And of course, if you wish, to thank them.
Okay, that's really easy for me. So I would say to my mother and my father that I still have no idea how you did it. I was 9 years old when I had my first gymnastics competition, competed for until I was 22 years old. So all of those years of 30, 40 hours a week training, coming home late at night, my brother also playing soccer at the same time, and somehow we still managed to have dinners together as a family. You never missed a competition in over 10 years, 15 years almost. You always cheered me on. You never pushed me too hard. It was always my decision. You empowered me in ways that I don't think that people can understand or appreciate until after their careers are over. So when I think about how we were able to be a family first, yet all of the things that you were able to support for me outside of my own gymnastics career was just, I'm speechless. I really don't know how you did it, but thank you.
Finally, Jene, love to ask, what's next for Jene Elzie?
Oh, how do you answer that question? No, I think what's next for me is enjoying exactly where I am right now. I'm so happy. I'm loving everything that I'm doing, and I'm just going to enjoy it for a little bit.
Great. And with your polling power at 100%, you must be in a good spot. So keep it up.
Thank you.
Thank you.